Welcome to Truthwave Media. My name is Jenny, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Brad Dacus, and he's an attorney, a speaker, and the founder and the president of Pacific Justice Institute. It is an institute that defends for people who cannot defend for themselves in the area of religious freedom and parental rights and other civil liberty issues. So welcome, Mr. Dacus.
Oh, it's great to be on the program. Thank you.
Yeah, I know lawyers are very expensive. How can you do these things free of charge for people?
Well, we're a nonprofit legal ministry. So as a 501c3 organization, we get donations and support from moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, and dozens of churches across America who believe and support our work, defending religious freedom, parents' rights without charge. We have a network of 15 attorneys on staff in offices in 11 states, plus hundreds of affiliate attorneys who volunteer their time to go to bat to defend people's civil liberties without charge.
Wow, that is so impressive. Okay, thank you for coming today. We're going to comment on the recent incidents that happened in Texas. The legislators, the Democratic legislators fled Texas to avoid the passing of a bill on election integrity. So what is your view on that?
Yeah, it's sort of ironic that these Democrat legislators in the state of Texas, under the guise of preserving democracy, actually thwarted their responsibility to the voters in their district to represent them by fleeing the state. This is a cowardice move, and it's also one that thwarts the whole legislative process that people go to the polls to support. And it's also ironic in that they say they're promoting democracy, but the reality is that this election integrity legislation helps preserve democracy, helps preserve the legitimacy of elections. What they're talking about in this legislation is very sound. It requires some kind of ID for absentee voting. So whether it's a copy of a driver's license or a state ID, or just writing down the last 4 digits of your social security number when people turn in their absentee ballot, this is very easy to do. This doesn't thwart voting. Prohibiting drive-in, drop-off ballots where you don't have good security, that's a very important measure as well. Prohibiting ballot harvesting, where people would take other people's ballots and just dump them off. That's also a serious move. Having tracking devices, attached to voting boxes or voting machines to make sure that they're not taken and then manipulated. This is really basic. So everything in this legislation is very common sense. Those who are opposed to it are opposed to it for very obvious reasons. They want to use voter fraud to get their way. We've seen this happen before. The state of Texas has over 140 since 2005 who've been criminally prosecuted for voter fraud. There's 44 pending prosecutions for voter fraud. And we're talking now only about 3 prosecutors in the entire state of Texas dealing with these prosecution cases, these fraud cases. So it's a real problem. It needs to be addressed. And the Democrats who fled the state should be ashamed of themselves for thwarting and being an enemy of integrity and legitimacy for our elections.
So I know that the governor of Texas has said that he wants to arrest them after they come back to Texas. Is that actually legally possible? And what are the most serious consequences that might cause for their behavior?
They can definitely be arrested if they're in the state of Texas. They have a sworn duty as a legislator to go and attend legislative hearings when they have them. In Texas, they usually have them just every other year. This is a special session. And the reason they have this special session is because the Democrat legislators thwarted it in May by leaving town. So they didn't have the majority. Most states, 45 states out of 50, just require a mere majority to have a quorum. Texas is a little different. So it requires more than just a majority. And so that's what the Democrats are doing. They're using this provision, this quorum provision, which is there to help preserve integrity in the legislative process, they're using it to thwart the legislative process. So the Speaker of the House has the authority with the governor to have these legislators arrested once they come back in the state of Texas and forced to be put on the legislative floor. The doors are then locked, and they can decide to vote or not vote. But they have an obligation, a sworn duty to the people in their district, to the people of Texas. And it's a very serious breach of that duty, that public obligation and public trust.
Well, since they are publicly elected officials, are their behavior subject to some kind of constraints or legal consequence?
Yeah, the only consequence that they face right now is, of course, being arrested and being forced back to the chamber, and then also the humiliation that goes with that will undoubtedly possibly affect them in their run for re-election. As far as other penalties that may try to be invoked, that hasn't happened to date, so it's pure speculation. But the real hammer, if you will, is being able to force them to come back into the chambers, whether they want to or not. And if they want to sit there and pout and have their arms folded and abstain from voting, they can do that. I would like to think that the voters who elected them would respond accordingly and boot them out of office and put someone in who's actually going to represent their districts.
So do you think their action will actually prevent this bill from being passed?
No, it won't in the end. And the reason is simply this. Right now, they're doing redistricting. And if there's not a majority for the legislature to meet to put together a redistricting plan for the congressional districts, the state legislative districts, then it then goes to redistricting committee, which is made up of all Republicans, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the state house, the state attorney general, and they will put it together. And that would be disastrous for these Democrats and their districts. Their districts could be basically wiped off the map and broken up and given to other districts. So they will be coming back. It's costing us time and resources. There's 2,000 state employees who won't get their paycheck because they're not back in legislative session to approve the paycheck funding. So they're going to be back. This is posturing, and it's not going to work. 2/3 of Texans polled recently are totally opposed to what they're doing, these shenanigans, and they're going to be held accountable for it after everything is all said and done. The state, there are actually some state Democrat legislators who did stay. So the state Senate, with those Democrats, did have a quorum. They did pass it. So now it's just the state House legislative body, and inevitably they will have to come back and do this. Also, they're also at this session going to decide whether to protect females in female sports from males coming in and competing against them, like in women's wrestling, for a big male guy to come in and demand to compete against them and take their scholarships. A lot of Texans feel very strongly about that. Unfortunately, the legislature can't decide on that issue either, unless these very liberal, radical Democrats decide to come back to the state of Texas and do their job.
It all seems to me that it's a show to just increase their publicity. And unfortunately, I saw that the Vice President Kamala Harris actually had a meeting with them. And also she said that to compare it as the Frederick Douglass. So this seems to me that those are the legislators, and they use democracy as a reason for their fight. And from a constitutional standpoint, do you think their claim has any legitimacy from the legal point?
Oh, it has absolutely no legitimacy at all. In fact, the United States Supreme Court has already upheld state measures to protect against voter fraud. Arizona's provisions were upheld and allowed to stand. So this is it's showmanship. There's no material difficulty for people to be able to vote. They can still vote absentee. They can still go to their nearby polling place and vote on election day. In fact, Delaware actually has some of the most strictest voter limitations. No one's saying anything about Delaware because it's controlled by Democrats. So this is political posturing. It's constitutional. The Supreme Court has made that clear what direction they're headed in with regard to deciding these cases. And it's about maintaining the integrity of elections. There's some on the far left that, as we saw in the last election, will use voter fraud in many ways on a massive scale. It's indisputable. And that's why we have to take this very seriously. If people don't believe in the elections, they won't vote. And if they don't vote, then our country becomes like a third world country with fake elections and massive corruption at a much greater scale than we have today. So that's why this is just simply so important, so basic, and why all Americans should unite and support efforts by states to preserve election integrity that is constitutional and protective of the rights of all citizens to vote and have their vote counted and weighted as it should be.
Okay, since your institute worked on the area of civil liberty, some of our audience get curious about the lawsuit brought by President Trump against the big tech like Facebook and Twitter for taking him off the platform. So how do you view on this lawsuit?
Yeah, this is an interesting lawsuit. It's new ground, but I think there's a good chance that President Trump may prevail in this case, simply because we have an effective monopoly of three companies, big tech companies, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all, that effectively control over 90% of the speech. You can't have free speech in the country when you have the government giving special perks and protections to these few companies that are controlling what's said and who gets to hear what's said. This is a new era we're living in, and I think the Supreme Court's a good chance they're going to rule on this accordingly, but we'll have to wait and see.
Do you have confidence in the legal system in the U.S.?
I do have confidence, particularly because of the judges appointed by former President Donald Trump, who respect the Constitution. And we as Americans should be very encouraged because of those tremendous historic measures that he took to preserve our courts from the Supreme Court all the way down to the circuit court and federal district court level.
Well, thank you so much. And so if our audience, if they need legal help, how could they reach you?
It's simple. Just simply go to our website, pji.org for Pacific Justice Institute, and sign up to get our Legal Insider newsletter. And of course, if people want assistance, they can request it. We have great resources to help people with dealing with the vaccine mandates, how to protect their children against social workers threatening to take their kids. Great resources. And of course, if they want to support our work with a tax-deductible donation, we greatly appreciate that as well. pji.org.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Dacus, for being with us.
Thank
you
for
your time.
Take care.